Support for this episode of PBS Reno Arts is provided by the Nevada Arts Council. Arts and creativity make us stronger, fueling innovation, prosperity, and thriving communities across Nevada. They boost our economy, promote well-being, and enhance education, empowering Nevadans of all ages. The Nevada Arts Council nurtures these essential creative forces. Together, let's elevate the arts in every corner of our great state. More at nvartscouncil.org. This is PBS Reno Arts. I'm Dave Santina in the studio of PBS Reno in Reno, Nevada. And I have with me today Chris Lanier, the 2024 Reno City Artist. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much for having me.
So I have to ask, first thing, what does that mean, Reno City Artist? I've never quite got a grip on it just by the title.
Well, it's a great thing that the city does, where every year they anoint is not the right word, but they select a city artist, and there are two things that you're required to do as part of that. One is to put on a solo show of your work. And then the second part, which I really appreciate, is you curate a show of other artists' work, which, I really like that they have this kind of communitarian aspect to it, where it's not just about you. And myself, right now, the show that I've curated is up at City Hall right now.
Yeah, so we are recording this on a Wednesday, and this will be then posted on Monday, November 18th, and then this show that you're talking about continues through this week.
Yes,
and
the 22nd.
If you're listening to this on day one of the release of this podcast, get thee to City Hall, right?
Yes.
And you can
well,
still
it would be
see
nice. It would be nice to show up to City Hall to look at art as opposed to have to pay a fine or something.
Yeah, hopefully you are not summoned to City Hall, but you choose to go as an art patron, right?
Yes.
So what's in the show if people go see it now? Who's up there?
So the show is titled Slow Draw, and which is since we're in the West, it's a play on quick draw. And I have three artists who are all amazing draftspeople who draw very slowly and deliberately, and it really comes through in the work. You can tell that attention has been paid, and I think even for somebody who doesn't consider themselves like a usual art goer or whatever, I think that the sheer craft on display is something that you can't deny.
I'm interested now. So when you say drafts people, I immediately think of architecture or blueprints, but that's not necessarily what we're talking about.
Drawers. It's slightly more efficient way the people who draw.
Got it. Okay.
So it's not to be confused with drawers.
Right. Very different things.
So it's really tuned to. I also called it Slow Draw as a nod to all the kind of the slow sort of culture movements, like slow cooking.
Okay.
Everything now I think has a slow version appended to it, right? That I think is actually really valuable in terms of. I think in this culture we have a desire for speed unto itself, and it's actually not necessarily a good thing. Like in the news sphere, this idea that it's 24-hour news,
right,
is not necessarily better than news that actually takes time to digest things, analyze things.
I'm pretty sure you're right about that. I think the last few decades have shown that we learn less, we think less about what we're digesting, and then we just want more, right?
Yeah.
It's like the 24-hour news cycle says. The implication of it by its existence is that there is 24 hours of new information to be absorbed, when in fact it's not even close.
Yes, I distinctly remember. I think it was when the Malaysian jetliner went down.
Yeah.
And they didn't know why it went down or exactly where it went down. And I remember looking into, it was a 24-hour news show, and they basically did all these kind of computer-generated, well, here are 5 ways it could have gone down.
Right.
Which was like, okay, so by definition, you've told me at least 4 ways it didn't go down. So why?
Right.
So that's not actually informing me.
No, that's 24-hour filler is what it really is,
Right.
with tidbits of information, unfortunately.
Well, and as somebody who, so I teach in the digital art sphere, and a lot of the work that I do is digital. So I've been very aware of the whole AI. I think it's fair to call it a revolution, disruption.
That's fair.
In
I think
arts.
that's fair.
It's a way overused word in tech, but
True.
It may have a seismic shift. And it's funny because I actually taught a class where we used AI tools. I like to understand it, and I'm kind of curious about it from a point of view of consciousness. Like, can machines think? Is it nonsensical to even suggest that that's possible?
Is the I in AI really intelligence?
Right.
Or is it more the A?
Right, exactly, and part of the thing that strikes me about it is the speed of it, where you put in a prompt, right, and then it generates an image within seconds. That if you were painting it, like the level of detail or whatever, it would take hours to do, or compositing it in Photoshop. But again, like this, the thing that I think that the boosters of AI misunderstand in terms of saying, hey, you can make stuff really fast, is that, actually making art, making a drawing, the time it takes is actually part of the pleasure of producing it.
That's a good point.
I have a lot of students who are athletic or whatever, and the analogy that I use is, well, say you're at the top of a hill, and AI could get you to the bottom of that hill in record-breaking time, but you would have no experience of actually going down that hill. Would you do it? And of course, the answer is no.
Right, and you probably have a lot of skiers in there too, so
yes.
they really get that analogy.
Yes, I try to tune it to the audience.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example, because the enjoyment is in the process.
Right.
I would suggest that it's also you could talk to the hungry people in your class and say, you could feel full from having eaten a pizza, or you could actually eat the pizza and enjoy each bite. What would you choose?
Right.
If you'd like to get there faster, you get none of the fun of the experience. Yeah.
Well, and I teach. I've been teaching these weekend courses up at the lake. So I teach at UNR, but I have been teaching at their Lake Tahoe campus, which was acquired from Sierra Nevada University about 3 years ago.
Right. I remember quite a while ago, doing some work up at the then Sierra Nevada College, which became Sierra Nevada University, and then became University of Nevada, Reno at Lake Tahoe.
Right.
It's just how many longer names can we add to it? But yeah, I mean, I met you back then, and so I found it fascinating that what it must be like to go through that process as a faculty member.
Yes.
But now you're teaching there and down at the campus in Reno as well.
Yeah, that's right. I usually teach maybe one class a semester here in Reno, and then most of my teaching is up there. But they've been piloting weekend courses where they bus students. I drive the van myself, the little Sprinter.
Okay.
We drive up the hill for a weekend up at the lake. And so I've done landscape drawing and photography weekend outings, as well as a drone cinematography class. And part of the thing is really, again, to slow people down. That it's not just about, I tell them, like, I'm not going to be looking over your shoulder. Hey, have you done 5 drawings? We've been out here for an hour. You got to kick one out.
Right.
It's really about, can you have an encounter with the natural environment out here? And having an artistic eye, or whether you're looking through the camera lens, or whether you're drawing it, or you're flying over the terrain with a drone, it heightens your awareness and your connection to those places. And that to me is really one of the values of art, and of drawing in particular, is having an encounter with reality in some way.
Yeah, and then I would imagine that the process of creating an artwork with that subject matter would intrinsically bring you closer to that subject as well.
Yep.
Yeah. So you're almost forced by the exercise to interact with the natural world.
Yes.
It's a good idea. I think somebody should teach that.
I think, and I think the students enjoy it. We had one when the weather was a little warmer. We went to the Tahoe Meadows, and we also went to Chimney Beach. And it was just warm enough where a couple of the kids got in the water.
Oh, okay.
And there were a couple of kids who found like a great spot, like right on a rock. And they got their drawings done, but they took a little nap in the sun there. And I was like, you know what? That's part of the class. You just got credit for that nap. And I'm not pulling a trick. That's really what I wanted y'all to do here.
Where were you when I was in college? Damn it.
Now, let me tell you, if you're napping through the whole class, it's a problem.
Oh, okay. All right. But you're using drone technology, which obviously is still, I mean, it's common these days, but still relatively new in the art world. How do you incorporate it into your practices?
I have two answers for that. In terms of teaching, it literally gives you a different perspective on your environment.
True, yeah.
Where you can kind of see kind of connections, elements of the landscape that you can't see from the ground. And part of the class is also about filming stuff from the ground. How do you integrate the ground level view with the vista view? But for me, it's also really an excuse to connect to history. The place that we went for the weekend class was the Donner Tunnels. And that there's so much layered in that little place from, Donner Lake, where, of course, the Donner Party happened.
Right.
And then, which I always think about whenever we have a big dump of snow there.
Yep. You can't, I don't think you can not think that when you're up there. Just
they named it after the worst thing that happened.
Right.
Right. So, and then just above that, where the tunnels are, right, that was the Transcontinental Railroad. Dug by Chinese immigrant labor.
Right.
That Truckee would have a Chinatown right now if they hadn't been driven out of Truckee after they had completed the work on the railroads. There is the petroglyphs right there, done by the Martis people, which looking at the graffiti in the tunnels and then seeing these 4,000-year-old petroglyphs, within a few hundred yards of it, I think says something about the human impulse to decorate, to ornament, right?
Right, and what an incredible contrast. You've got the graffiti that is constantly being redone,
right,
with the untouched, hopefully untouched 4,000-year-old petroglyphs.
Yeah.
So you've got some permanence and some impermanence right next to each other.
Yeah.
That's quite a contrast.
Yeah, and it just and being able to see those in connection with and I also talk about Anne Brigman, the photographer the Nevada Museum of Art had the retrospective of her work a few years ago, who did these amazing photographs right in that area. Where she, and again, the early 20th century, where like just going out and hiking, like without wearing a skirt, was pushing the envelope.
Right, you're outrageous.
Right, but she and her friends, they would pose nude among the juniper trees and make these kind of visual connections between the human form and the rock forms, tree forms, and so you have in that channel like so many layers of things happening that it's just by documenting them and giving the students like a little reading to do and presenting some of that stuff. I think it really is a tool that allows you to talk about and open up the history that camera eye as it rose through the air is capturing.
So you're teaching these classes. My wife teaches or has taught classes, not in art, in English. And other friends of mine who are teachers all share the passion for the moment where they can tell that they've had an impact. And I wonder, in an art class, do you get that moment? Does that happen? Do you have experiences with your students coming to you with, this just hit me, or I've just had a light bulb, or whatever it is that? How does that work?
Well, it's funny because it happens at different scales. So as I was teaching at Sierra Nevada University, right, and now we're teaching out all the students who are currently going to the school during the acquisition, but you would have a relationship with them over 4 years, or sometimes a little more than that if they were doing the BFA track where they have an extra semester to create a solo show. And you really do get to know them over the course. It's funny, like sometimes you have to take care in an art class in a sense. Like even in a small workshop environment, I remember doing a comics class that I did again just at a few-hour workshop, not even a full weekend, and I just asked students to draw. Three different things, and one of them was something that they had childhood memory of. And so one student, everybody put their drawings up on the wall, and one student did what seemed like an almost humorous drawing or an innocuous drawing of a pancake that was done in the Mickey Mouse style, right, where you do 3 circles that are intersecting, right. So it looks like Mickey Mouse. And so, so as we were asking people to kind of explain the context of it, the student said, well, you know what? My mom, she was a drug addict, and it was really not easy growing up. But she would make the pancakes, with the Mickey Mouse sort of thing, and I always remember that as a connection or a point of care for her. And you know what? When you're just like prepping kids to like draw comics for a thing, and then suddenly that reality enters, right? You have to be careful, right? Like I had to pay respect to that, right, and not just brush by it. And right. I think, okay, well let's look at the other picture here, right? This may be a little less loaded.
That's a little
right.
Heavy,
that was not. So I had to respect that and acknowledge it in a way. And it's something that, I think your typical like science or math teacher doesn't have to accommodate, right?
No, I wouldn't think so. Where you have right and wrong, right, right answers, right. Wrong answers,
right? Or there's not like where does that experience enter in if you're solving an equation, right?
Right.
There's not a channel for it, but art provides a channel for that potentially to happen.
It does, and so then it raises the question in my mind: how do you grade as an art right. teacher, because it seems almost impossible to tell someone this is of a certain level versus right. your standard or your peers or whatever. I've always wondered about that. Like, how do you approach grading an art student?
I have to say that I do it.
Sure, you have to, I guess.
Well, and it can be a useful tool in terms of you have students, maybe they're not hitting the deadlines, maybe they're not producing the work. So around the midterms, you let them know where their grade stands, and it right. motivates them. So as a motivating thing, like I will use it in my thing. I'm not interested in it as an artist in the sense of my aim in the classroom, which you don't always hit. And in fact, you tend to hit in the more upper division classes it's really not a teacher-student relationship. Mm-hmm. It's we are artists in a room solving art problems together. And just because I'm older than most of y'all, I have a deeper well to draw from,
sure.
right? A more extensive set of references that I can pull from. But yeah, it's not. And I'm not. It's funny because there's a technical, like teaching digital art. I feel like it gives me a pass in a sense, in that there is a technical level to it of like, do you know how to make this thing happen? Do you know what tools to use to composite these photographs in a way where you're hiding the seams that the two photographs were taken differently? And I can have a rubric of like, these are the things that you have to accomplish, and it seems practical, right, in the sense.
Sure. Okay.
And I try to do a really good job at that. So that, hey, you know how to use this program, or you at least know it well enough so that when you have to Google something, you have at least a basis so that you can do it in 5 minutes instead of spending hours figuring out what to do, right? But really, on the art production side of it, I'm not like I don't. I want students to feel like they have the technical means to achieve what they want to do, but I don't really care. if it technically necessarily hits certain marks.
Okay.
I just care that they had an encounter with something. Well, and I teach non-art students as well, and to this sort of thing of. I can rant about all the things that are wrong, like with the educational system or whatever,
Sure,
or just socially, and part of it is over professionalizing the arts, or we over professionalize everything, right? Where it's like, you know what? If you're not, if somebody's not paying you to do this thing, then you're not really doing it.
Oh,
right.
So it's not legitimate because you're not at the level of someone who's doing it for a living.
Right. And to me, and I'm aware, college is expensive. So,
Yeah.
I'm aware that I don't want to just be twiddling thumbs or whatever.
Right.
But you know what? Human beings have created art. I mean, thousands, tens of thousands of years ago. We have the traces of that. And I think it's only recently that we've educated people out of doing that. Like the kids, right? You have any 2-year-old, they're going to be singing, they're going to be drawing, painting, doing all this stuff. And then we educate them out of doing that or peel back their impulses to do that.
Right.
And even if you're not doing it professionally, and for the weekend classes, it actually hasn't been art majors who've been taking those classes. A lot of them have been science majors. And there's still a value in participating. Part of it is just pleasure, right? The pleasure that you can have by doing that.
I can see that.
And then part of it is, again, that connection to reality, right? That connection to the world that art provides. And I think it's funny because if you told somebody who's playing pickup basketball, hey, you shouldn't be doing that because you're not Michael Jordan or whoever.
Right.
Nobody's paying you to do this. Why are you wasting your time? They'd look at you like you were an idiot, right? Because no, I do this because I enjoy it and it gives something to me. And to me, that art experience is so fundamental beyond whatever kind of technical check boxes that you give it. That's what I feel like I try to address in the classroom.
Nice. Well, and then you are also an art critic and writer yourself, and you're an artist yourself, but you also have written criticism, of, I guess you would say, professional artists.
Yeah.
And so that's a different approach, I imagine, to teaching because you're looking at it from a different perspective. How do you approach criticism?
I actually don't think it's different.
Okay.
In that, what I try to do as a teacher is to reflect what I see in a student's work, right? That the student themselves might not be aware of, right? Because I bring a trained eye to it, and I can be like, oh, this is what's going on. And particularly if you're just starting out, you may not see, you may be seeing in the art that you produce what you think is there, but it might not actually be there. Or there might be stuff in there that you didn't put in there intentionally in your conscious mind, but that actually is still there. I've always felt that my subconscious is a lot smarter than my conscious, right? And it's just a nonverbal access to things that later you can step back and be like, oh, that's what I was thinking about, or that's what I was wrestling with. And I think, so in some ways, I take the same approach when I'm writing criticism, and that I'm trying to communicate what I see. It's just that if I'm dealing with artists who have a longer history of working, right, they are probably more articulate about it. They've probably put more thought into it. Although, again, a lot of artists really do work instinctually. And all artists hate to make their artist statements. I teach a class where I have to write an art statement. I'm like, yeah, I know I hate it too. But really being able to be articulate about what you're doing really is part of the process. And if you're just making art so that people are just going to say, do the version of the thumbs up. Oh, hey, great work.
Oh, right.
I love it, right? And the conversation doesn't
point?
progress.
Yeah.
But then what's the point of
What's the
doing
point?
it? Because it really is about having a conversation. And I do think that, that it's really valuable, that it's not just about putting the stuff out there, getting applause. It's really about having a conversation. And criticism is really a way of bringing that to the fore. And I think, unfortunately, in Northern Nevada, whatever the sort of territory there's not a huge there's not a huge venue for it. Like I write for the Capital City Arts Initiative when they put it on their shows, and then I write a lot for Double Scoop, which I think has just has had a crucial role in creating conversation and capturing all the interesting stuff that happens here. Like we're not a media center out here like New York or Los Angeles.
Sure.
You know, we don't have the infrastructure for that. And frankly, it was deeply discouraging to me when I moved here. I spent a chunk of time in San Francisco, did some art writing in that context, and then came over the hill when I got my job up here, pitching to those places, hey, you know what, I'd like to write about work that's just over the Sierras, right? Because people are doing interesting work out here, but there's not a huge infrastructure for doing it. So, you know, people can drive across the hill if there's interesting art. And the venues that I was writing for out there really were not interested. They're like, if you come back over the hill and see a good show in San Francisco, sure, but, you know.
How funny. The Sierra Nevada was a real wall for them. They wouldn't look past it.
Yeah, apparently so.
Interesting. Wow. That's a kind of a telling moment. I wonder if that was how many years ago?
That was like 15.
Yeah, I wonder if they would still feel the same today, or
there might
be open to it. Who knows?
Maybe so. Yeah,
there are a few more people here than there were then.
Yes.
Just a few.
Right.
Just a few.
But God bless Chris Wagner for providing a venue.
Yeah.
For me and all the other really excellent writers that she has, and she does excellent writing as well.
Full disclosure, my wife is one of those writers, so I also am a fan of Chris Wagner because she's been wonderful, and she kind of rescued that art community, at least in the print or virtual print form, because the News and Review at the time that was gone and Double Scoop came in. Yep. Chris kind of created it to help find a voice for the arts, and it's stuck around. So that's great. That's great to know.
Yeah.
Someday I'll get her on here and we'll talk.
Yeah, she good. She's a good talker.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. So before we go, I wanted to come back around to at the end of your term as the Reno City Artist. It's this calendar year is the end of it?
Yes, that's right.
So do you have any highlights of the year that you would like to point out, or things that you wanted to make people aware of that happened during the year in your tenure?
Well, I mean, I guess I should, or I feel like I should again. Just it was a real delight to work with the artists that I worked with for this curated show. So, and I might not have even mentioned their names. So let me
by all means
go through that. So the three artists are Kelly Korpening, who's the chair of the art department at UNR. Jessica Hayworth, who's a very talented illustrator and artist, who way back in the day was a student of mine back in the Sierra Nevada college days, and Otis Poisson, who is currently he was based in Reno and is currently at graduate school in Chicago right now. And it is. I'm always delighted when people will play with me. You know,
sure.
And so when and I really believe in the work. Kelly's work is there are these still lives of elements of the landscape. Like when she goes out on a walk, she'll pick up bits of wood. And the target bag that got blown onto the trail, and all these things. And she assembles these still lives that are basically inventories of what the natural environment is, right? So they're sort of like landscapes by another means. You don't get the vista, but you get the data set of what is out there.
Okay.
And and the attention that she pays again to every like crack and twist like of those wood forms. The sheen of the plastic, in there, they're really, they're really wonderful. And she's also on display. She did 3D scanning of some of these arrangements that she then produces as these resin sculptures that she then draws on. So it's sort of halfway between a drawing and a sculpture. Jessica's work is again these finely rendered. Very imaginative drawings that look like bad omens to me. Of one is this sheep figurine that's on a table. There's one very arresting image of a person who has some sort of sheet over their face and their hands are pressed to it, and they're all sort of disquieting. But also just so finely rendered. Part of the exhibition actually is I went to all the artist studios and filmed about 3 minutes of them drawing in real time, which is like visual ASMR to me. I just love just the delicate building up the shades.
It's hard not to get sucked into that.
Yeah. And then Otis's work. Well, it's funny because Otis threw me a curveball in that he again is excellent drafts person, like these incredible. He did these drawings a while back of disassembled iPads, or open up things, and like every little screw in the interior was accounted for.
Wow.
And then he for this show he did drawings that were pure black drawings that had nothing figurative in them at all. Where which he arrived at very the black. I told him this. It's like there are civilians walking through this. This is not an art gallery. This is City Hall, and you're basically leaning into every stereotype that they have of the artist who's going to make the black painting for me.
Yeah.
So you might as well just put on a beret and just just do it all. But they're very much addressed to the screens that we have in our homes. When we turn them off, we have these obelisks in our homes, and he's worked up the surfaces of these drawings so they have this reflective sheen, just like those manufactured surfaces. So I mean, they are very kind of beautiful. You see faint traces of your reflection in them pieces. But I did insist that he put in one drawing that was like this figurative thing, because it's like, come on, at least prove to them that you can make a quote unquote real drawing.
Well, thank you for the descriptions. I'm curious now. I have to get down there. It's Slow Draw, the name of the show, and that's through the 22nd of November at Reno City Hall. So please get down there if you get a chance. Now, we haven't even talked about your own art. I assume that people can catch pieces of it online somewhere.
Yeah, probably the one-stop shop there is my website, which is just chrislanierart.wordpress.com, which is frankly a little out of date, but there's some good stuff on there, and I'm also on Instagram, just as myself, Chris Lanier, which I really do use as a venue. In fact, the solo show that I had was basically prints taken from the stream of my Instagram posts that are just, the show is called Backyard Radiance, and it was just about not chasing an image, not going to great expanses to find things, but what do I find in my everyday circuit? Some little accident of light or texture that amounts to an image to me somehow.
I remember one was a shadow that looked like a pyramid, I think you had. I forget the title of it, but it had something to do with Egypt. I think.
Yeah, no, it was. I've mastered the art of making hashtags that nobody else uses, which is kind of counter to what you're supposed to do with that. That one was faux Egyptian landscape.
There it is. Faux Egyptian landscape. That's the one I just saw that today when I was looking at some of your stuff.
I think I'm the only one with that hashtag out there.
I think so. I love it. That's an art. The art of the unrepeated hashtag. It is unproductive in one way, but in another way, it's highly sought after. I would imagine it's a bragging right. You get to have bragging rights. All right. All right, well, before we go, let me remind everybody to watch Artifacts on PBS Reno via broadcast, or stream it on pbsreno.org or the PBS app, or on the PBS Reno YouTube channel. Also, please read art views at pbsreno.org. Now, do you have a question or maybe a comment or a suggestion? Please send them to me at podcasts@pbsreno.org. I want to say my thanks to Chris Lanier, and thank you for listening to PBS Reno Arts.
Thank you.
Support for this episode of PBS Reno Arts is provided by the Nevada Arts Council. Arts and creativity make us stronger, fueling innovation, prosperity, and thriving communities across Nevada. They boost our economy, promote well-being, and enhance education, empowering Nevadans of all ages. The Nevada Arts Council nurtures these essential creative forces. Together, let's elevate the arts in every corner of our great state. More at nvartscouncil.org.